Welcome friends, welcome back to the kitchen, welcome back to Sunday morning in the old cookbook show. Today we're going to do another recipe out of this cookbook, published in 1898. It is called the 20th Century Cookbook. Very forward-looking cookbook. The preface talks about how they used science to work out the recipes and how they used science to sort of make sure that the recipes all work. A lot of interesting recipes in this book that look backwards, but a lot of interesting recipes that look forward. The recipe that we're going to look at today is called Grated Pineapple Pie. And it is a recipe that all at once looks forward and backward. It is a take on another pie that we've done from this book called the Grated Apple Pie. And the Grated Apple Pie is a pie that I can trace back to one of our other cookbooks, printed in 1685. So that is an old pie indeed. And this one pretty much is the same. It just swaps out canned grated pineapple for the apple. And the date of this recipe in this cookbook is very interesting because it predates canned pineapple from Hawaii by a couple of years. Because Dole sets up in Hawaii in 1899, and they're not successfully canning and shipping pineapple from Hawaii really until 1900, 1901, 1902. So the canned pineapple used in this recipe, as near as I can tell, would have been grown in the Caribbean, shipped to Baltimore or Boston on the U.S. Eastern Seaboard, and canned there and then shipped around the United States. So canned pineapple was something very new at this point, and would have been a real treat. Now, the recipe is for 2 pies, but I'm only making 1 pie, so I have 1 pie shell here. The recipe wants you to par-bake the crust, partially bake the crust, or blind bake the crust. I've got a hot oven going, I've got a pizza stone in the bottom, I'm going to stick it in, but only to the barest, very light baking, so it's not going to be in for very long. So I'm going to stick that in now, keep an eye on it. Not an operation that I really like doing, something I don't enjoy doing. I always feel like I'm going to screw it up terribly, and I often do. Not an operation that you see in a lot of cookbooks prior to this. 1900 seems to be a time when you start to see it a little bit more. Still not very often. Not as often as you see it done today. And I've got a few theories in my head about why that might be, but, you know, who knows if they're correct or not. So I beat the yolk and the sugar together, and then it asks for some sweet cream. So measure that out. So some people are probably tired of hearing me say this, but I get asked about it so often, I feel like I need to say it every time. Sweet cream, in the context of this recipe and this time period, is not cream sweetened with sugar. It's sweet cream because it's not sour cream. That's it. There's no sugar involved. It's just what we today would call cream. And it's the same with milk. You see a lot of recipes in this time period that call for sweet milk. Same thing. Not sweetened at all. It's just milk that hasn't been soured or isn't buttermilk. Now, to this, we need to add the crushed pineapple or the grated pineapple. I'm only making half the recipe, so I'm only going to put in half a can. One of the problems with this recipe is there's not a lot of sugar in it. And the reason there's probably not a lot of sugar in it, because at this time period, the canned pineapple would have been packed with a sweet syrup or a heavily sugared syrup, pineapple and sugar syrup, to help the preservation process. Today, it's just packed with juice, so it's not nearly as sweet. So I have a feeling that this pie might need a little bit of sugar, but I'm going to make it once and I'm going to find out. I'm going to say the pie shell is almost done, so we're going to move on to whipping the egg whites. I've got the egg whites in a copper bowl. It doesn't say to add any sugar to them, so I'm just beating them to stiff peaks. Doesn't take long in the copper bowl, and I have to fold them into that mixture. Whipping egg whites in a copper bowl and then folding them in. They fold in so nicely because the egg whites never get to a point where they're too stiff and dry. If you've ever tried to fold in egg whites and they seem too stiff and dry and you can't get them to fold in, you've whipped them too far. You've gotten them too dry. You can't do that with a copper bowl. I'm going to say that pie shell is baked to the right level. Now the recipe says to spread with a layer of nice jelly. What I've got on hand is some of our homemade strawberry jam. So I'm going to layer that in. How much is a layer? How much is too much? How much is not enough? I don't know. Let's go with that. Okay, so I've got stiff egg whites, and I'm going to fold those into the pineapple. That's a really good looking mixture. Okay, bring the pie in here, and we'll pour in the filling. Okay, I'm going to put this on a baking tray or a sheet tray because the pie is pretty full. I don't want it to boil over and get the inside of my oven all dirty. So I've got the oven preheated, 425. We're going to stick it in. I don't know how long it's going to take to bake. The recipe gives absolutely no indication at all. So, in it goes, and I'll just keep an eye on it.
Hey, Glenn.
Hey, Jules.
Hey, friends. Pie.
Pie. Everyone loves
Is it
pie.
a custard pie?
It's kind of custard. It's custard. It has custard elements.
Does that mean it has milk and eggs in it?
It has milk and eggs in it.
Okay.
It is. Let's see if I can get this out.
Maybe the custard spilled a little bit.
A little bit, and then my cutting might not be.
Yeah.
There we go. So it's a
First piece is always the worst too.
grated pineapple pie.
Ooh. So is it like a date custard pie?
Yeah, kind of, but it's more like. Well, we'll get into that.
Okay. Let's try it out.
Okay,
All right,
so
let's go then.
let's give that a.
Oh, I just ripped a whole big piece out.
That's quite good.
I like that. It reminds me of some kind of a pudding I used to have as a kid with pineapple, and for some reason I feel like there was pineapple and marshmallows in it.
So, I had wondered earlier. There's not much sugar in that at all. There's
It's called pineapple.
Well, it's got 2 tablespoons of sugar, the pineapple, but so this is from 1898, the dawn of canned pineapple. And so it would have been canned with a heavy syrup, a heavy sugared syrup, which would have brought more sweetness to it in the time period, but I don't think it needs it.
I also imagine you probably could never get pineapple unless it was canned.
Most people would have only gotten canned pineapple.
Yes.
On the eastern seaboard, you would have had it brought in if you went down to the ships and got it, because it was being canned in Boston at that point.
Okay.
So I had alluded earlier, if you take this pie, it's kind of like the grated apple pie on the page before,
Okay.
but if you roll it all the way back, it goes back to this book, printed in 1685. Okay. And there's a recipe in
For grated pineapple?
for a grated apple pie, and we made it once. A made dish of butter and eggs. Take the yolks of 24 eggs. Right? So it was heavily egged with a little bit of apple and put together, and it had a lattice crust on top. That video is on the channel if you want to go back and look at it. I'll try to remember to put the link down, but you can trace that pie forward through fingers as it changes, and this is just an updated version with pineapple.
I really like it.
That's a good pie. That's a good pie. Thanks for stopping by. See you again soon.